Good morning, Fort Collins Christian Church. All of you who are joining us online this morning anyway, of course, because some of us are meeting over at CEC for an outdoor worship service this morning, while others of us, we're right here online worshiping together. We're going to continue our study through the Gospel of John this morning. Daniel did a great job the last couple of weeks taking us through John chapter 9. This morning, we're going to be in John chapter 10. So if you want to make your way on over there right now so that you can follow along on the scriptures that we are going to be studying this morning. I want to start by putting out there a phrase for you to kind of fill in the blank. And that phrase is, life is blank. How would you answer that or fill in the blank for that statement? I looked up some things on the internet this week to see what other people had to say about that. And here's some things that I found. One is, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And of course, that's Forrest Gump who said that. Also, I saw this statement, life is difficult. And that's actually from the book, The Road Less Traveled by F. Scott Peck, a book I read toward the end of 2019. Another statement, life is a journey that must be traveled no matter how bad the roads and accommodations. And that was Oliver Goldsmith, who was a poet and a playwright. And then for the more modern crowd, this one, life is a crazy ride and nothing is guaranteed. And that was from the rapper Eminem. None of what I found on the internet on this statement was particularly inspirational. I mean, these quotes that I just shared, they seem to speak primarily to the drudgery of existence, to the monotony of the routine of life, or even with a subtle sense of hopelessness about the unknown. And many that I've spoken to recently seem to have similar sentiments about life right now. The monotony of life with the COVID restrictions, confusion over the turmoil in our world. At best, an attitude of surviving but not thriving in life. And none of those things sound like what Jesus speaks of in John chapter 10. So let's go and start with verses 7 through 11 of John chapter 10. It says, "Therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." First here, Jesus says that he is the gate, or in some translations, maybe yours reads, the door for the sheep. And the sheep, that's us. But he's telling us that he is the way to the Father. It's similar to what he says in John chapter 14, verse 6, when he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That's what he's saying here about being the gate for the sheep. But then he says that he is the good shepherd. And if we come to the Father through him, there is a glorious description of the life that he has designed for us, that he describes as life to the full, or in some translations, abundant life. And this life to the full only exists because of the good shepherd who lays down his life for us. The title of the lesson this morning is Life to the Full in the Hands of the Good Shepherd. And let's look together at some truths about the Good Shepherd in John 10 that allow for this life in him that Jesus describes as life to the full. The first truth is that the good shepherd comes to the sheep. Let's look at verses 1 through 4. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. You know, a common metaphor in the script for people in the scriptures is sheep. In Psalm 100, it says, we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. In Matthew chapter 9, Jesus has compassion on the people because he sees them as sheep without a shepherd. And then in a really famous verse that is a prophetic message about the Messiah saving his people, in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 6, it reads, we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. And then that last one there in Isaiah 53, we see truth about why this metaphor is used for us. Frankly, sheep are dumb, wander away from where they're supposed to be, and that's how we are. You might go, wait a minute, I didn't tune in here to be insulted and called dumb. But that's reality of how we are as people spiritually. We're just like this, like sheep are. Sheep cannot survive in the wild on their own. Sheep, they're not smart. Sheep are prone to anxiety. Sheep will eat what's bad for them. Sheep will drink from water that is bad for them. They don't know how to protect themselves. Sheep can't run. I mean, if one sheep walks off a cliff, another is likely to follow him right off that cliff also. Is it really that difficult for us to see the parallels of those truths to us as people, spiritually speaking? And that's why in this passage in verse 2, knowing all of that about sheep, who is it that enters the sheep pen? We're told it's the shepherd of the sheep. The good shepherd, Jesus, enters the pen coming to us. He comes to the sheep. He knows that we need someone to lead us. So in him, we find the one to follow to the abundant life that he desires for us. And he does that by calling the sheep, which is our second truth about the Good Shepherd in this passage. The Good Shepherd speaks to the sheep. If we revisit verse 3, it says, he calls the sheep by name and leads them out. Then in verse 4, we're told he goes ahead of them and they follow because they know his voice. You know, we as sheep, we need a shepherd to follow. We need a voice to listen to. And 4 times in the first 16 verses of John 10, the Good Shepherd's voice is mentioned. It says we hear his voice. We know his voice. We listen to his voice, which is different than hearing it in that it implies obedience toward his voice. Hearing, knowing, and obeying the voice of the Good Shepherd is imperative to experiencing life to the full. You know, consider for a minute this idea in verse 3 about the Good Shepherd calling us by name. I mean, imagine meeting someone prominent very briefly, And then perhaps months or even years later, running into them again and they call you by name. They remember your name. I mean, what would that mean for you? How would that make you feel? Certainly noticed by them, certainly important to them. But what would it say about them that they remember you that way? See, Jesus calls us by name. He knows us. He gives personal attention. He calls us personally. That is amazing. The creator of the universe knows us intimately, calls us by name. You know, the problem is, for many people, is we're not listening to his voice or able to distinguish his voice from the many other voices in our lives. What are the obstacles to hearing his voice? I mean, we're told that he comes to us and he speaks to us over 300 times. In the NIV, we are told the Lord said. So clearly, God is a God who wants to communicate truth to us. So that means the problem of not hearing is on our side of things, not his side. Are there other voices that are drowning out his voice in our lives? Is it the voice of friends and family drowning out his voice? Perhaps it's the voice of social media. There's a lot of very loud voices right now that are not in line with his, that can easily be grasping our attention and drowning out his voice. Is it the voice of politics? I mean, we're in an election year in the United States, and the voice of politics is very loud. Or maybe it's simply our own voice, the voices in our head. I know for me, this can be a challenge. I can battle with demonic thoughts about myself, about other people, about God. I must hear his voice, or those thoughts will dominate me. I've got to be able to listen to the voice of truth. I'm reminded of that old song, Voice of Truth by Casting Crowns. Will we listen to his? And I specifically call those other voices demonic for a reason. We saw in John chapter 8, either God is our Father speaking to us or the devil is. Those are the only two options. And Jesus' voice leads us to abundant life. But Satan, he wants to steal. He wants to kill. He wants to destroy. But we can hear Jesus' voice clearly in the Word of God. So we've got to make sure we're taking proper posture toward him to hear him clearly. I love this passage in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20 through 22. It says, "My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them." He says there to turn your ear to his words. It's kind of this idea, if you've ever been talking and maybe it's loud and there's other voices and you need to hear somebody, is to be able to, you kind of lean in, like, so that you can hear better. And how much different is that in conversation than if someone has, you're having a conversation with someone, they've got their mobile device out and they're talking, they're kind of like, yeah, I mean, what a difference in the attention between someone doing this, trying to listen, versus someone really leaning in to pay attention. And that's what this proverb tells us to do. And that's what we need to do with the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd speaks to us and his words lead us to life to the full. But are we leaning in to hear? Thirdly, the Good Shepherd cares for the sheep. Let's go ahead and look at verses 14 through 18 in John 10. He says, "I am the Good Shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. And can't you just hear in these words the care that Jesus has for us? He says, I lay down my life for them. There are others, and I must bring them in also. And he says, no one makes me lay down my life. I do it willingly. The good shepherd cares for the sheep. You know, perhaps the most well-known section of Scripture about the Lord as a shepherd, besides this one in John 10, is Psalm 23. You know, and in that psalm, the psalmist says, the Lord is my shepherd. And then in verse 1, he says, I lack nothing. You know, in the Christian life, 2 Peter 1:3 tells us that we have been given everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of Him. We lack nothing we need in the Christian life because of the Good Shepherd. You know, that psalm also says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. You know, sheep, they can't rest if they're anxious. And we saw earlier their tendency is to be anxious. And doesn't anxiety hinder us also? And yet in 1 Peter 5:7, we're told, cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. See, He also makes us lie down in green pastures. You know, that psalm says that the shepherd leads me beside still waters. You know, I mentioned that sheep will drink any kind of water from anywhere. And that's where they pick up parasites that make them ill. And so the shepherd actually has to guide the sheep to clean water that is going to help them remain healthy. And we're just like that. We're so willing to damage our souls by drinking from the wells of the world that are poisonous if we're not following the guidance of His Spirit. Only He can fill the thirst of our souls, as we studied back in John chapter 7. You know, that Psalm 23 says that the Lord is my shepherd. He restores my soul. You know, sheep, due to their kind of relatively large bodies compared to their small legs, when they're on uneven ground, they can fairly easily fall over. And if they begin to panic, they frequently end up on their back with their legs up in a position that's called a sheep being cast. And in that position, they're completely unable on their own to get back on their feet. And it's dangerous because in that position, they can die within hours, either from the heat, if it's a hot day outside, or when they're in that position, gases build up in their abdomen that can kill them within hours, or simply the danger they face from predators now that they're in this cast position. And so the shepherd is the one who can help them out, to get them back on their feet, to calm them first, and then to turn them over on their side. That's what a shepherd does. And then begin rubbing the legs because the blood has flown out of the legs, to get the blood flow going back to their legs. And then we'll lift them back actually onto their feet and even stay there to hold them until they're ready to walk again. This is the great care that a shepherd gives to a cast sheep, to restore them to their feet. And this so accurately communicates the image of what the Good Shepherd can do for us when we are downcast, which is not living life to the full. He doesn't tell us in that position, get yourself back up. pull up your bootstraps and stand back up. Rather, he does the caring work to get us back on our feet. And in the greatest act of caring of all, John 10 tells us that the Good Shepherd, Jesus, willingly laid down his life for the sheep. And it's in this giving of his life and the giving of his Spirit to live in us that we find life to the full. And that's our last truth here. The Good Shepherd gives life to the full. Jesus is the only one who can fulfill the promise to give life to the full. The whole context of this section of John chapter 10 about thieves and robbers and hired hands versus life to the full and a shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep is what happened in John chapter 9. See, back there as Daniel preached, Jesus and his disciples had come across a man blind from birth. Jesus knew the man, Jesus touched the man, and Jesus healed the man. But then that man was brought before the Pharisees, and the Pharisees criticized Jesus for healing him on the Sabbath. They didn't rejoice with the man. They didn't care about the man. In fact, they criticized him along with Jesus, lectured him for being a sinner from birth, and then kicked him out of their holy presence. That is the context in which Jesus starts to talk about thieves and robbers of life, which in that context was the Pharisees, instruments of Satan in that situation, versus the Good Shepherd who knows his sheep and lays down his life for the sheep. That is our hero, Jesus. You know, Philip Keller is an author who was a professional shepherd in life, and he's written some books with some great insights on this topic. And he wrote a book called Lessons from a Sheepdog, and in that book he tells a story of a special dog who he shared life with on his very first sheep ranch. He says he first came across this dog through a classified ad that read, "Wanted, a good country home for a border collie, chases cars and bicycles." And so Philip Keller, he went to look at her, and when he first went, the owner actually had the dog chained from her collar to a steel post with a second chain from her neck to her back leg. And the dog sat there crouched in the dirt, glaring and growling at him. And the owner said, "I can't do anything with this creature. She's crazy. She's flat loco. All she does is chase after kids, chase after every car that goes by, chase after kids riding bicycles, jump the fences." And Keller, he knew the ability that a border collie possessed. But he realized that under the mishandling of the wrong owner, this dog's talent had been twisted and subverted to destructive ends. He knew her only hope was to be freed from the tyranny of the wrong owner and be placed under the hand of an owner who would care for her and help her reach the potential for which she was created. So he took the dog to his ranch. At first, all she did is growl at him. She wouldn't even eat. She wouldn't let him touch her. She would tremble at the tone of his voice, and that was not to be unexpected, as all she ever knew was the abuse of a subversive owner. But in her new owner, she would find someone who saw beyond the growling and the dirt and the disobedience. She would see an owner who saw the powerful potential for good locked up in this tormented creature. After a month, the dog still had not responded to the loving care of the new owner. And then finally one night, as he stood watching the sunset, he felt the warm, wet touch of the dog's nose on his hands that he was holding behind his back. He knew that now he had earned the beginnings of her trust. So for her to flourish, he was now going to have to train her. And he did so with simple commands. Come, sit, fetch, stay, stop, down, right, left, etc. And where she obeyed, she found reward. Where she didn't, she found correction. But she learned that her new master meant what he said and discovered the freedom that came from serving a master who loved her and whose commands were designed to make her all that she was created to be. We too have had a master who chained us, Satan. A master who wants us to waste our potential on sinful pursuits. Remember John 8, Jesus said, whoever sins is a slave to sin. But a new master has come along, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, who sees beyond the ugliness of our lives and sees the potential for which we were created in the image of God. And our new master knows that we've got to be freed from the tyranny of the old one. And he gave his life to accomplish that freedom. But for us to flourish, he knows he must direct us with new commands. They are simple and they are direct, and they are found in his word of truth. And when we listen and obey, we discover that his commands are not a burden. His commands bring freedom, a freedom to become all that we were created to be as children of a Father who loves us so much that he sacrificed his Son to purchase us from that old tyrannical master. Jesus laid down his life for the sheep to free us from the things that rob us of the life we were created for, life to the full. But in his grace, we find the impetus for that life to the full that he promises. And with that in mind, I want to close out in Titus chapter 2, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, verse 11. For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age while we wait for the blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself a people that are his very own, eager to do what is good. The grace we find in the sacrifice of the Good Shepherd is the key to life to the full. A life that says no to ungodliness. A life that is self-controlled and upright, shining like a light in this godless and dark age in which we live. A life that is being purified by the Good Shepherd himself as he speaks to us and as we incline our ear to listen and follow. A life that is eager to do what is good in order to honor the Good Shepherd. A life that rejoices in the fact that he gave his life to redeem us from the tyranny of the one who wants to steal and kill and destroy. And finally, a life that waits in great anticipation for his return to claim those who are his, those who choose to embrace this life to the full that the Good Shepherd has called us to and freed us to experience. But the question is, will we listen intently to his voice as he calls us?